Welcome.
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 Welcome to the State of American Business.
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 From Las Vegas, Nevada.
AmCham, Singapore.
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
From Santiago, Chile.
Cairo, Egypt.
The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce.
AmCham, EU.
The African American Chamber of Commerce of New Jersey.
From Annapolis, Maryland.
Welcome from Accra, Ghana.
AmCham, Turkey.
The Business Council of New York State.
Austin, Texas.
The Global Business Community.
The Global Business Community.
The Global Business Community.
The Global Business Community welcomes you.
Some see jobs. We see problem solvers. We see groundbreakers. We see risk takers. We see stories. Like a scientist turned CEO who went on to build a company producing medicines that saved the lives of millions. A young entrepreneur who started a business in a garage and now sells to dozens of countries around the world. A child who overcame dyslexia to lead the coding team at a global tech startup company. While every story is different, these stories have one thing in common: freedom. Freedom to dream, to create, to grow, and pursue. We are a nation where competition and collaboration coexist. A nation whose rich tapestry of people and ideas create innovation and opportunity. At the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we advocate, inform, connect, and fight for America through business growth, building strong relationships that push us forward with communities across the country and governments around the globe, so that the story of America continues to inspire the world.
Hello, I'm TJ Douglas, founder and CEO of The Urban Grape, a family-owned wine store in Boston and winner of the 2021 Dream Big Small Business of the Year Award from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. To the thousands of guests joining us from across the country and around the world, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2022 State of American Business. The theme of this year's program is Competition for the Future. In just a moment, U.S. Chamber President and CEO Suzanne Clark will provide insights into how competition is the driving force that powers American free enterprise, improves lives, and advances our society. Then we will be joined by public and private sector leaders who will discuss how competition served our nation during the pandemic, how it will shape our economy into the future, and how government can help or hinder that effort. After today's program concludes, the conversation will continue with weekly featured events over the next 4 Tuesdays that you can register for on uschamber.com. For businesses like mine, competition is a motivator. It's what pushes us to adapt, innovate, and accelerate the pace of progress. It's what led my wife Hadley and I to develop a more customer-friendly approach to wine called the Progressive Scale, where we organize our product by body rather than region to be more accessible to customers, whether novices or collectors. The result has helped make us one of the most successful independently owned wine stores in the US. Like so many American businesses, we know that while competition is a driver of growth, collaboration can be an accelerator. Our business has teamed up with local restaurants to offer meal and wine pairings. And we organize weekly virtual meetings to help other small businesses find new ways to serve their customers during the pandemic. Together, these initiatives returned more than $80,000 in sales to Boston restaurant community just in 2021. Fueled by healthy competition, businesses like mine compete, collaborate, and create a better experience for the customers we serve. This is made possible by sensible policies from Washington and champions like the U.S. Chamber giving us a voice in big debates facing the business community. It is now my honor to introduce today's host and keynote speaker, Suzanne Clark, President and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. As a former small business founder and owner, a director on 2 major company boards, and a longtime advocate for job creators of all sizes and industries, Suzanne has a fierce commitment to free enterprise that she channels through her leadership of the world's largest business organization. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Suzanne Clark.
Thank you, TJ, and thank you to our terrific partners from chambers and associations across the country and AmChams around the world. You met a few of them a moment ago, and you'll hear more across today's program, highlighting the importance of the Federation to our work. We are delighted to welcome all of you, joining us from all 50 states and more than 140 countries. The market is not your mama. It's not going to love you just because you exist. Or so said my favorite business school professor. What he meant, and what we all know, is that you have to earn it. You have to add value, meet needs, and solve problems. That's what so many of you as business owners and organization leaders do every day. You challenge assumptions and you drive change. You may fail, but then you get up and you try again. You push yourselves to be better, smarter, faster in pursuit of your dreams. You strive and you succeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, the state of American business is competitive. Businesses are not simply competing to win today, but to build a better tomorrow, to propel our country and our world toward a brighter future of growth, solutions, and opportunity. Competition is how we build our country, make it exceptional, and move it forward. Competition in the marketplace brings the best ideas to life and to people and communities everywhere. Competition for talent gives people the opportunity and incentive to achieve their dreams. It harnesses the best of human imagination and ingenuity for the benefit of society. Competition for global leadership pushes us to engage with the world for our own security and prosperity, and to lead in the world for its advancement. And competition of ideas fosters the civil discourse and constructive exchange of views that lead to common ground and real solutions. Competition will enable us to innovate our way through this pandemic, and it will help us use all of the challenges, disruptions, and opportunities accelerated by the pandemic to shape a new economic era that will define our future. It starts with competition in the marketplace. Market competition incentivizes people to take big risks and persevere through failures. It motivates people to start and grow businesses. It enables companies to go public and create wealth for others. That's how customers get more choice and lower prices. It's how people save for retirement and secure their futures. It's how all of us get to benefit from life-saving innovations and world-changing solutions. And it's the process that has allowed this country to build the most innovative, resilient, and dynamic economy in history. We all witnessed the stunning capacity for innovation in the race for COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutics. Who won? Humanity, with multiple vaccines and drugs made widely available, saving millions of lives and providing millions of people our best defense yet against the pandemic. And the race to distribute them worldwide must continue with urgency. Because we are innovative, we're resilient. This was revealed in a surprising way in the most recent quarterly Small Business Index released by the U.S. Chamber and MetLife, when small business owners across the country reported the highest levels of optimism since the start of the pandemic. We wondered why. After all, they're facing the challenges of a 40-year inflation high, historic worker shortage, supply chain disruptions, not to mention more COVID uncertainty. When we asked TJ Douglas, who opened the program a few minutes ago, why he was optimistic, he told us this: Does it take too long to get wine from Napa to Boston? Yes. But the constant innovation in packaging, delivery, and logistics is helping us keep up. Likewise, innovations in e-commerce enabled brick and mortar stores to go online, to endure lockdowns. Small manufacturers pivoted to meet major shifts in market demand. Service providers like healthcare clinics adopted telemedicine, discovering new efficiencies and cost savings along the way. What we're seeing, what we're hearing, is that businesses have built new muscle. They've become more adaptive. They're more comfortable with discomfort, knowing that whatever challenges lie ahead, innovation can see them through. And that necessity of innovation drives dynamism. Did you know that new business formation in 2021 is on pace to shatter all previous records? That means more people than ever before stood up, took a risk, started something new, and created jobs for others in this challenging environment. This dynamism isn't simply a feature of the COVID economy, nor is it just limited to startups and entrepreneurs. In fact, if you look at the top 10 companies by market cap, you'll see that not one of the companies on the list in 1980 is still on that list today. And if you look at the list over time, you see companies, they move in, they move out, they come back in, they go back out, and so on. What does that tell us? That markets work. They enable businesses and industries to evolve, disrupt, and compete, to serve customers, solve problems, and strengthen our society. Despite the clear innovation, the resilience, and the dynamism of our economy, we have leaders who think the government needs to step in and impose a heavy hand. The Biden administration introduced a sweeping executive order based on the false premise that our entire economy is overconcentrated and stagnant. Modern-day trust busters on Capitol Hill from both parties think all big is bad and necessarily a threat to small, when in fact, our economy is an ecosystem where big business depends on small companies and vice versa. They're each other's vendors, suppliers, customers, and partners, and they each employ the consumers who keep the entire system afloat. The dynamism we see today in new business formation, the constant churn among the list of America's largest companies, and the tremendous choice and lower prices available to consumers are all proof that our antitrust laws work. On top of that trust busting, the Federal Trade Commission has taken such an aggressive stance against mergers and acquisitions that small and medium-sized businesses fear they'll have worked for years to build something and yet have no exit strategy if they choose to sell. The FTC has a really important job to do in stopping anti-competitive behavior that harms consumers. But it can't do that job if instead it's trying to enlarge its powers to, as its new chair has actually said, shape the distribution of power and opportunity across our economy. Now, these are just a few examples of the threat of government overreach that now confronts businesses of all sizes and undermines our fragile economic recovery. There are numerous others, from the proposed partisan tax and spending spree to fund a massive expansion of the federal government, to aggressive oversight and overregulation from agencies like the SEC and the CFPB, to enforcement from the DOJ, the EPA, and the IRS. Here's the Chamber's message to our partners in government: be an enabler, not an inhibitor. You can set the conditions for businesses to succeed. If you want them to continue delivering growth, innovation, jobs, and prosperity, let them do it. There's a reason 70% of American voters think our nation's highest priority is keeping businesses on their feet so they can move our country forward. There's a reason the public deems business the most competent and the most trusted of institutions. Government can't do what business does. It can't take the kinds of risks businesses can. It can't operate at the speed of innovation. It cannot create wealth or prosperity or new job opportunities. It can only redistribute them. If bureaucrats and elected officials don't stop getting in the way, we will stop them. We will challenge overreach and defend the rule of law at every turn, in every agency, with every tool at our disposal, in Washington, in state houses, and in the courts. Let me be clear. The U.S. Chamber will take on this fight because what's at stake is no less than the future of our free market economy. The U.S. is also in a competition for talent. Employers are competing for job seekers in the tightest job market in decades. Our country is competing to attract the best talent from around the world while also building our own skilled and educated workforce. We all know that the competition for talent has become an urgent and complex economic imperative. What the data tells us and what you deal with every day is that nearly 11 million jobs sit vacant. More than 2 million people lost their jobs or left the workforce during the pandemic, and half of them still aren't actively looking for work. I talk to CEOs and leaders of businesses of every size, industry, and geography every day, and to a person, they tell me this: the workforce shortage is a crisis. It's contributing to supply chain disruptions and rising inflation. It's undermining business growth. Look, we simply can't move people from one industry to the other or from one skill level to the next. We have to grow our workforce if we want to grow our economy and stay competitive. So, who wants to put their talent to work? Who wants to pursue their dreams in a dynamic economy flush with opportunity? Immigrants of every skill level. So where are they going to go? The US or Canada? Let's make it Austin or Boston or Atlanta or Denver or any of the countless US destinations in search of top talent. We must double the number of people legally immigrating to the US, and we must create a permanent solution for the dreamers, those young men and women who know no other home, who contribute to their communities, but whose legal status is in limbo. And who in this country can we help get off the sidelines and back in the game? Parents without access to affordable childcare, people with limited access to broadband and remote work, formerly incarcerated adults who have paid their debt to society, individuals struggling with addiction. Let's remove these barriers through thoughtful, achievable solutions. And let's be careful with government policy. We're seeing a growing and troubling number of proposals out of Congress that substitute a government check for a paycheck. And what role will technology play in shaping the future of work in this era? Well, whether it was Henry Ford and the assembly line or adoption of computers and the internet, innovation has always played a critical role in improving efficiency and helping our economy grow. Pandemic-era disruptions have accelerated the pace at which technologies like automation and artificial intelligence can be applied to work. Through the leadership of the U.S. Chamber's soon-to-be-announced AI Commission and our broad established tech advocacy, we will make sure government policy is supporting innovation, not holding it back. Finally, let's not forget our greatest advantage, the diversity of people, perspectives, and ideas. And let's ensure that everyone in this country has the skills, the education, and the opportunity to go as high and as far as their hard work and talent will take them. For the nearly 11 million jobs that sit vacant today, and for the jobs of tomorrow that haven't even been invented yet. Winning the future means competing in global markets and competing for global leadership. By one vital measure, trade, we are standing still, and that means we're falling behind. While other economies race to ink new deals, the U.S. has not entered an agreement with a new trade partner in a decade. And the current administration, consumed by caution and internal reviews, is doing little to change that. In fact, it's yet to embrace even relatively uncontroversial initiatives, such as a trade agreement with the UK, our closest ally. But Europe is charging ahead. The EU has 46 trade agreements with 78 countries, while the US has just 14 trade agreements with 20 countries. And the trend for our tariffs has been up, not down. Meanwhile, China continues to rise as a formidable commercial and strategic competitor. On January 1st, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, a massive China-led trade pact that covers all of East Asia, entered into force. It means better access to some of the world's fastest growing markets for businesses from Korea and Japan to Indonesia and Vietnam. Once upon a time, our answer to China was the Trans-Pacific Partnership, an 11-country trade pact in Asia-Pacific. Remember the TPP? American negotiators wrote 90% of it. Well, the US has pulled out. And now it's the UK, Korea, Taiwan, and yes, China, trying to join while we stand on the outside looking in. China has emerged as the top trading partner and source of investment in much of Africa and Latin America too. If the US fails to engage in mutually beneficial trade agreements with these countries, we'll lose export sales and the domestic jobs they support, not to mention weakening strategic alliances. Look, there's no easy answer when it comes to China. We must compete vigorously around the world. We must stand up for our values and security and against unfair trading and regulatory practices. And we must cooperate on critical global challenges such as sustainability and public health. We have to be able to do all three. And doing so deftly will be one of the defining features of American leadership in this era. Opening markets and contending with the rising China are not the only ways our leaders must support American businesses in the global competition for the future. We need a domestic tax code that does not put U.S. companies at a disadvantage, as some propose to do with the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. We need a regulatory framework that supports the private sector-led innovation needed to address challenges such as climate change, which cannot and will not be solved without the ingenuity and investment of American business working in cooperation with our global partners. We need strategies to maximize the security, efficiency, and resiliency of global supply chains while making smart decisions about manufacturing capacity here at home. We need a tough stance on cyber threats, working with allied partners when possible and unilaterally when necessary to deter and punish criminals and their state sponsors. And we are all acutely aware in this moment that we need a global plan, not only to get us through the pandemic, but also to prepare us for the next one. When international governments begin negotiating a global pandemic treaty, as the WHO has pledged to do, the private sector must have a seat at that table. Finally, winning the competition for the future requires a robust competition of ideas. The competition of ideas is alive and well in business. What about politics? Our democracy is strongest when candidates and elected officials are focused on winning people over to their ideas and on the merits of those ideas, not merely relying on the support of those who already agree with them. Politicians should compete for public support with their platforms, persuading more voters, and then building broader coalitions to turn those good ideas into good policy. It's not a radical concept, but this moment seems to call for a radical shift back in that direction. The U.S. Chamber is calling for a new movement of bold, and I mean bold, business advocates committed to defending those elected officials who dare to find the common ground necessary to enact durable policies that move our country forward, and committed to supporting pro-business champions in both parties. This coalition, those of us fighting for business in Washington, and all of you leading our economy across the country, we have to be as loud as the extremists. We have to be as passionate about our interests as those on the far left and the far right. We have to boldly, proudly, assertively put our ideas into the public debate because we can compete and win on the strength of those ideas. My message to lawmakers today: when you work, our system works. Let good policy be the incentive. Let progress be the motivation. Have the courage to forge agreements and the common sense to pursue what can actually be achieved. Let's follow the model of last year's historic bipartisan victory on infrastructure, proof that our system can work. My message to the media: you not only provide the biggest platform for the exchange of ideas, you also help form the very foundation of our democracy. Obsessive coverage of intra-party warfare and partisan gridlock does nothing to engender public trust or advance civil discourse. It merely fuels the tribalism across the country that drives the partisanship in Washington. Have the confidence in high-quality journalism and the commitment to our future to cover what's working, what's going well, and what our country needs to move forward. My message to the business community: get louder, more passionate, and less apologetic. Businesses are key stakeholders in this democracy, leaders in this country. The greatest way we can serve America is by succeeding on its behalf and fighting for policies that will usher in a new economic era. And my message to all the citizens of this great nation: let's get on the same side in this competition for our future. The U.S. has enough enemies. Let's stop being our own worst enemy. Let's stop the infighting and show the world that our democracy, supporting our American enterprise system, is what made the U.S. dynamic, diverse, resilient, and strong. If you hear nothing else today, hear this. The stakes are high, because this is not just a competition of ideas here in our nation and in our politics. It's a competition of models in the world, and the world is watching. Which one will win the future? Which one will deliver the growth, opportunity, and innovation that shapes a new economic era? The one that's top-down, state-run, centrally managed, or the one that's spurred by freedom, the freedom to disagree and the ability to work through it, the freedom to try and fail and the incentive to get up and do it again, the freedom to make a living for yourself and make a difference in the lives of others, the freedom and the ability to learn, improve, and grow, and to constantly strive to fulfill our potential and live up to our ideals. We have all the imagination, ingenuity, and genius of a diverse people, rising, thriving, and competing in a robust democracy. Those are the people I'm betting on. We have a free market system that forgives failure and rewards success. That's the system I'll put my faith in. And this is what we all must fight for. Ladies and gentlemen, the state of American business is able, agile, resilient, and ready. We are ready to compete and win, not just for us, but for the pursuit of a better future for all humankind.
In the race to restore global health and support economic recovery during the pandemic, pharmaceutical companies have led an industry-wide effort to drive innovation, fuel medical breakthroughs, serve communities, and save lives. Pfizer and BioNTech were the first to receive FDA approval for a safe and effective vaccine and have delivered more than 2.5 billion vaccines to every region of the world. Now, Pfizer has nearly 100 new treatments in its development pipeline with an ambitious goal of reaching 225 million people with innovative new products by 2025. Please welcome Dr. Albert Bourla, Chairman and CEO of Pfizer, for a conversation on how competition in his industry drives innovation, scientific developments, and new technologies that improve lives and our society. Dr. Michelle McMurray-Heath, the President and CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization, will lead the discussion.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you for this important event, and I'm honored to be interviewing Dr. Bourla and to help share his latest thinking on the pandemic, the current business climate, and the future of health innovations. Dr. Bourla, it's great to see you again.
It's great to see you again. Please call me Albert Michel as we speak together when we are together.
Perfect. So, Albert, you run the company behind some of the most powerful tools that we have today to fight COVID-19, including the first vaccine and your new treatment pill. Can you describe the urgency and the sense of purpose that's driven your team to fight this global crisis?
It was a very, very high sense of urgency that was driven by the uniqueness of the situation. We are a company that we are really purpose-driven, and all our employees are really driven by a unique desire to make a difference in the health of other people. But particularly during the pandemic, that created a situation that everybody was feeling that is a soldier in a fight against an enemy of humanity, and that was the virus. And that was clearly one of the biggest drivers in our ability to achieve what we achieved. It was not only the smart planning, the use of infrastructure, the use of capital, the use of scientific brains that they are unique, but also was that they have self-sacrificed everything during those 9-10 months that they were working on this project to make sure that they will deliver the solutions that the entire world was hoping would deliver. So yes, it was the purpose that drove the success.
Well, COVID has been a very worthy adversary and a shape-shifting adversary at that. And the rise of Omicron has shown us that more solutions and innovations are really needed to fully protect our population. So how do you continue to adapt and innovate and fight against a persistent challenge like this one? And what has the sector really learned to help us prepare for the next pandemic?
I think this is rightly our main goal right now. We try to make sure that we stay ahead of the virus, and we are doing that by making sure that we are checking it and that we are understanding how the virus is changing, how the conditions are changing, so that we can bring even better vaccines if needed, but also to bring treatments. This is Omicron, for example, is coming in a very difficult point. It's at a stage that surprised everyone with how quickly it transmits, but and overwhelms once more the healthcare system. But this is a blessing that at the same time we are coming with a new innovation, which is the oral treatment against COVID that could keep people out of hospitals basically and provide the solutions that the healthcare authorities are looking for. We will continue doing that. We will continue doing that not only with vaccines and treatments, but other things that could affect our ability to fight COVID. We have been blessed to be successful twice. I don't think that came by chance. I don't think it is luck. It was the right moment, the right culture of the company, the right people, the right dedication to this cause, and we will continue using all of that for being able to stay always ahead of this virus.
Well, you've led not just in the science, but also in the business models, as you alluded to. And, the fact that you're licensing your new antiviral therapy around the globe has really shown a new way. Can you tell us a little bit about the thought behind that decision and the impact that you hope it will have?
Clearly, this is a life-saving medicine, and this is something that can be produced by others. It's not like the vaccine that it was highly specialized. The raw materials that were needed for this vaccine, and very few could supply those materials, and very few places in the world really exist that they could transform those, let's say, materials into life-saving vaccines. With the treatment, there are normal capabilities, manufacturing capabilities, high-quality manufacturers of generics or of other pills, they can do it. And we felt that that should be the solution to make sure that no one will be left behind. And this is why we licensed, actually, we gave our license to the medicines pool, patent pool, organization, which is basically a United Nations-backed organization, royalty-free. And they will license this to generic manufacturers predominantly, that are interested in producing it. And we are waiving all our rights on intellectual property, and we will provide them also guidance how they need what they need to do it. The process is ongoing right now. Hundreds of them have applied to the medicines pool, and pretty soon we will select the ones that will receive the licenses.
It was a stunning act of corporate generosity. So really, really admirable. And
you need to know, Michelle, that this license is covering 53% of the global population. That we are giving it royalty-free for anyone to manufacture it and provide it to the poorest of the countries. And by the way, we, in addition to that, we will try also to have some of the quantities that we are making also ring-fenced so that we can provide to the poorest of the countries.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, you've led not just in this generosity, but also in your record of partnership and collaboration. So you've built a strong partnership with BioNTech in developing the vaccine. Can you give us some feedback on the lessons that the pharmaceutical industry and the business community at large can really learn from this type of collaboration?
I think it was the ultimate success for me. I couldn't find a better partner in so difficult conditions than the BioNTech as a corporation, and that created a very strong bonding between their scientists and our scientists, between their CEO and myself. And I'm very pleased with that. And I think the fundamental reasons why that went so well was really the personalities of the individuals and their commitment to the same purpose. We had the same values. Things became very clear to me from my first call with with Ugur, their CEO, when we discussed what are the basic principles. And the principles was basically one: we do whatever is good for humanity, period. Whoever needs to do it will do it. It's us, it is you, we don't care. We are 50% partners, irrelevant who does the work. And the only thing that is driving it is our desire to bring as quickly as possible the best possible vaccine to the world. And that was the only thing, nothing else. That drove everything moving forward. And all the decisions were easy to be made because we were going back to that principle, going left or right in a decision. Is it enhancing or diminishing our chances to come quickly with the best possible vaccine possible? And if it was diminishing, we were going left. If it was enhancing, we were going right. And this is how all the decisions were made. And that was very easy when you have a compass that is helping you, a North Star, how to make a decision.
It's a very important leadership issue because I hear you saying, keep it simple, align the values, align the goals, and go from there. Is it that simple?
It can become that simple, particularly, think life is complicated, but when we are dealing with a crisis like that, life suddenly becomes very simple. It is, are we better in fighting the virus or not? Nothing else really matters when you are in a situation like that. And I think that helped a lot.
Well, Pfizer is not just leading the way in COVID. You're developing a wealth of pharmaceuticals, from cancer treatments to blood thinners to drugs that stave off heart failure. What are some of the most innovative items in your pipeline? Can you give us a sneak preview?
Well, there are really a lot. We are right now having 94 active research programs with multiple studies in each one of them. So hundreds of thousands of people involved in our study. So it's in cancer, that is one of the areas that we are very, very heavily focused and in investing. We have some of the leading franchises in breast cancer and in prostate cancer, and already with products in the market, with medicines in the market. And we are working on the next generation of breast cancer and prostate cancer. We are working very intensively in blood malignancies, cancers of the blood, from lymphomas, from leukemia. We are working next generation medicines of cancer that include vaccines against cancer and mRNA also against cancer, that are going to be able to evade the mechanism that cancer is using to evade to create resistance to treatment. So this is a very, very high in our agenda. But cancer, of course, is not the only thing. Actually, in vaccines, that we are very, very strong. As you know, we are working right now on multiple other vaccines. We are working on RSV, which is one of the biggest challenges in respiratory diseases after COVID. We are working on flu, of course, to bring a way better flu vaccine. We are working on zoster now to bring a vaccine that it is very effective and very, very safe. We are working to have a vaccine against the tick-borne diseases that are Lyme disease. That is, it's a major, major problem in the US, and multiple other vaccines. We are working on rare diseases. Some of the projects that we are more proud of are projects in gene therapy. We are speaking about people that have hemophilia, that heavy forms of hemophilia, that they are needing weekly injections of factor 8 or 9, which is what they are missing for life. And that still is not good enough, and they are having a lot of bleeds in their joints. We have people on the 5th year now that a single injection 5 years ago still is protecting them, and they have less than 1 bleed per year when they had multiple bleeds per month. Transformational therapies that will change patients' lives.
So is there a role for the broader business community, such as many of those in our audience today, to support these new efforts and help you bring these innovations to more patients around the world?
I think we need to find ways to collaborate, and that's the only thing that can stay in the way, I think. We are strong. We are having a lot of expertise. We have a lot of capital. We have clearly a mindset of innovation. But we know that science is very diverse, has proliferating rapidly. So science is going to happen not only in the labs of the big biopharmaceutical companies or the big Ivy League institutions, but also in thousands of small biotechs. So for me, the new wave of innovation can only be supported if we support this ecosystem of the thousands of biotechs that exist, particularly in this country, because this is the crown jewel of the industrial successes of this country, and the academia and institutions like ours. I think our ability to collaborate and our ability to maintain a vibrant life sector, it is what will make the big difference. Keep in mind, for example, the COVID crisis. Things would be right now very different, and when I say very different, it will be very dark if it wasn't for a thriving life sciences sector that existed at the time of the crisis. This sector is the one that stepped up to produce the diagnostics, to produce the vaccines, to produce the treatments. It was not WHO, it was not CDC, it was this private sector that made the difference in our lives. And it is extremely important, I believe, that the countries that will move ahead are the countries that they are having a policy that it is creating good environment for innovation to thrive.
Well, Albert, one last question. There'll be business case studies written about your successes in COVID for probably decades to come. But as you reflect back on the last couple of years, do you have one or two leadership lessons that you would share with the other business leaders in the audience today?
People don't know what they can and what they cannot do. And if anything, they have a tendency to severely underestimate what they can do. Don't let that misguide you. Ask more from your people. Give them the resources.
I love that.
Be behind them, but ask more from them. And you will be surprised, and they will be surprised how much more they can deliver when you ask them.
Words of wisdom. Great place to stop. Thank you so much for your time today, and appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
No, I wouldn't say wisdom, but clearly few of the lessons that I truly believe after I have lived them. So thank you very much, Ms.
Thank you, Albert.
With their vast networks and expertise, global logistics companies connect the world's population with everything from household goods to life-saving products. UPS has 540,000 employees across 220 countries and territories around the world. Recently, the company has delivered some of the most critical freight of all time, more than 1 billion COVID-19 vaccines to countries big and small, including Ghana. Please welcome Carol Tomei, CEO of UPS, and Chris Clark, President and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, for a conversation on competition, innovation, and resilience in one of the most essential sectors of the global economy.
Well, hi, I'm Chris Clark, President and CEO of the Georgia Chamber of Commerce. Aisha, thank you for the lead in. I'm excited to come to you today from Atlanta, Georgia, and just across town is my good friend Carol Tomei, who's the CEO of UPS. formerly of the Home Depot, and really she's got her chamber bona fides too because she was president of our Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. And Carol, we're so thankful to spend a few minutes with you today and appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Chris, it's wonderful to be here with you.
So, Carol, let's just jump into this conversation about, I think we were calling it leadership through crisis, but it's really, I think, servanthood through crisis, the way that you've led up at UPS. So you took over in March of 2020, which I'm sure in hindsight, you're thinking great timing on your behalf. And so I remember when you came in, you talked about transforming UPS, bringing it, making it more innovative. And then immediately we have a global pandemic where your workers are on the front lines. We follow that up with a supply chain crisis and your employees and teams are on the front line. And now we're in the middle of a labor shortage crisis, which again affects you and what you do every day. And so I'm really curious just to jump into this. How have those huge changes in the economy impacted your efforts at UPS and what you're trying to do, transform and innovate? Tell us a little bit about what this has been like for you.
Well, it's been an incredible journey, actually. You know, when I was announced as CEO back in 2020, UPS was 112 years old at that time. And while we were the largest integrated carrier in the world, we knew that what got us there wasn't going to get us to where we needed to go. Our competitors were changing, our customers are changing, and the rate of change was accelerating. So I came on board with lots of ideas about what we might do to lean into that change. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. So the first thing we had to do was to make sure that our UPSers around the world were safe. And we weren't ready for the pandemic. We didn't have the necessary safety materials like masks and gloves and hand sanitizers that we needed to have. So we quickly amassed all of that product to make sure that our UPSers were safe, because UPSers are essential workers. While the world shut down and started to shelter in place, people were ordering online, and we saw unprecedented volume flow into our network. In fact, in the second quarter of 2020, we had to hire 40,000 people just to handle the volume. So we're keeping our people safe. We're hiring people in to make sure that we could deliver the essential goods to the customers that we serve around the world. And then we said, you know what, we've got to really declare our why. We knew what we were doing, but we wanted to declare why we were doing it. So we put together a cross-functional team, and they did a masterful job of pulling together our why. And here it is, moving our world forward by delivering what matters. And we think that's just really captures our essence, because we don't just move goods, we do good, and we do that in an equitable and just way. And so that was a rallying cry for our team during this unprecedented time. And then we looked at our strategic framework of customer first, people led, innovation driven, and we invested into that framework. We invested in the customer experience. We improved our time in transit and made it simpler to do business with us. We invested in our people. Some things were symbolic, like changing our appearance programs. Some things were material, like more money. And then we invested in innovation, technology, and healthcare logistics. And, you know, in this unprecedented time, I think UPS has not only survived, we've thrived.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful way to look at this. Let's unpack a couple of those things if we can for a minute, particularly the role that you guys have played on the front line as essential workers, particularly in delivering vaccines. I think the number is you've delivered something like 1 billion COVID vaccines working with Pfizer. And by the way, I got my Pfizer booster last week. So I hope everyone on here does that, and encourages your employees to do it. But talk to us about the importance and the role that you play there, particularly in how you deliver those vaccines equitably, not just in the US, but honestly around the world.
Well, we're very proud of our part in this vaccine movement, if you will, and Pfizer's a great customer of ours. We have delivered over 1 billion vaccines in 110 countries around the world. And it's not just the number of vaccines that we've delivered, but it's how we've done it. This is a very precious package. It's actually not a package, it's a patient. And so we have special ways of monitoring the delivery of this. We have sensors, so we know where that package is at any point in our network. We have a control tower that we stood up to follow that package around the network. We manufacture dry ice to make sure that package is chilled as it needs to be chilled. And we've delivered those vaccines with 99.9% effectiveness, which means we got the vaccine to where it needed to be on time, 99.9% of the time. So we're proud of that. Now, we've been in the healthcare logistics business for a long time, so we were ready for this, but it took a lot of coordination amongst our entire company to make this happen, and we're really proud to be part of that. Now, as it relates to vaccines in an equitable way, we have a commercial business, but through our foundation, we've also delivered vaccines, delivered 20 million vaccines in partnerships with organizations like Gavi. And one thing, Chris, that was really cool is that we delivered vaccines in Rwanda using drones.
Holy cow. Okay. So this whole drone conversation is a great segue because I want to talk about, you mentioned innovation. We've been reading about UPS innovation here a lot over the last 24 months. You guys are really on the cutting edge of what's coming. And I've worked with your team here in Georgia on everything from 3D printing and manufacturing, to drone regulation. So tell us a little bit. I want to hear about your, it's hard to say, battery powered cargo planes, your drone delivery efforts, and just a little bit more about the innovation and what you kind of see in the future for UPS.
Well, innovation driven is part of our strategic platform, and we think about innovation across the entire supply chain. We also think about it through the lens of sustainability. We emit over 35 million metric tons of greenhouse gas every year, and most of that comes from our aircraft. We fly 600 planes almost every day. So we've declared we want to be carbon neutral by 2050. And to get there, we're going to have to look at alternate fuel for our airline. We're very excited about the partnership we have with Beta Technologies, who are building battery-powered aircraft for us. This is cargo. These planes will carry about a metric ton of cargo, so think of it as a small feeder aircraft. And we're really excited to bring that aircraft into our fleet. We'll take the first delivery of that in 2024. On the drone side, we were the first company that was authorized by the FAA to have a drone airline. We call our drone airline Flight Forward. I'll tell you, it's a little bit early from a commercial perspective. There are lots of issues with drones. You can't fly them when it's windy. You can't fly them when it's rainy. But we've got a lot of pilots underway, and there will be a time where drones will have a bigger role commercially.
Wow. And so we need to be thinking too, I guess, at the state level and at the federal level about drone regulations and how we make sure that we're open for business when you guys are ready. And so
yes,
we'll work on that. I want to jump around a little bit. We've talked about the pandemic. We've talked about innovation. I want to talk about the workforce shortage for a minute, because here in Georgia and everywhere else in the country, every year around the holiday time, we see the ads, we see your temporary workers. You guys, as you said before, hired tremendously during COVID. Talk to me a little bit about how you met the challenge during the holiday rush. And then when you think about your employees and how you're having to change what you do to attract the next generation of workers, help us unpack that a little bit.
Well, we look at our labor force as, the secret sauce of our company. When you think about the UPS brand, who do you think about? You think about our drivers, right? The men and women who are coming to your home or to your commercial business, dropping off those businesses, and they do an amazing job every day. We hire about 100,000 workers for the holiday season. These are seasonal workers. The cool thing is, Chris, is about a third of those folks stay with us full time. So they start their career with UPS as a seasonal worker. And we have many men and women who are in senior leader roles here who started as seasonal workers in our business. So I think it's because we have career opportunities and not just job opportunities that we are able to bring people into our workforce in this tight labor market. There's a war on talent for sure, but our people are working on cool things too. So when you think about people who are in the IT space, you can work on automating your facilities or drones or battery powered aircraft. So we've got some really cool things for people to work on. So we've been able to manage through it pretty well. We've also changed our pay practices in certain parts of the country, as many companies have. But our jobs are great jobs to begin with. The majority of our workforce is covered by some sort of a bargaining agreement today. So these are very attractive jobs. Do you know that our Teamsters don't pay anything for healthcare? How cool is that?
Wow. I don't know if the other employers on the call today want to want to know that that's what they've got to step up with competition. But I think that's where we're seeing the market going, right? More flexibility, more opportunities to grow, more benefits across the board. Okay, talked about labor crisis. I want to come back to supply chain for a minute. I mean, it's kind of at the core of what you guys do. Talk to us a little bit about kind of the supply chain innovations that you guys have been doing in Asia and what you think business leaders in this country need to be thinking about from a long-term reinvestment, retrenching of the supply chains, realignment, reshoring. What are you seeing? What does innovation look like there?
Yeah, I think there have been a few wake-up calls over the past year. When the world shut down because of COVID, many manufacturing plants weren't open. And then when the world started to open up and demand exploded, well, the manufacturing plants had to catch up with the demand, and there weren't enough ships to bring it across the ocean. And well, we all know what happened. So we've got to have a totally different perspective on inventory management. And it requires, I think, more nearshoring. So get the inventory closer to the end user, which is going to mean your working capital levels go up because you'll have to move away from just-in-time inventory to just-in-case inventory. I think we also have to really work on end-to-end visibility. And this is something that at UPS we are really focused on. When we get a package, we get it delivered. Our on-time delivery percentage is in the high 90s. But we want to help our customers have end-to-end visibility so they understand where the product is along the supply chain, from the manufacturing plant all the way down to their distribution center or their end use. So we've got a project that we're calling Project Evolve, which will allow a digital experience to understand your supply chain end to end. Not ready for prime time yet, but it's something we kicked off last year. I'm pretty excited about the future there.
So this Project Evolve and some of the other work, I think a lot of times when we think of supply chains, we think of big multinational companies that are moving a huge product. But you guys really, you make such a difference for small businesses, and that's been really part of your bread and butter and part of your DNA for so long. Are these types of programs going to be available to those small business owners that we're trying, particularly in the retail space as well?
We're going to need to make it available for everybody at some point. It's the only way that we remain competitive, actually, is to get that end-to-end visibility for our customers. So, yep, over time.
Right. Okay, last question. I think part of what's so difficult in a changing world that we're in with all these different, whether it's the pandemic or the labor shortages, is that CEOs today really have to be a little bit of a futurist. I don't know that we had to be that 10 years ago, but you have to keep looking down the line, innovating, as you've talked about before. Look in your crystal ball and tell me what trends, what do you think are going to be the big things that shape business for the next 5 to 10 years that our listeners today should be focused on?
Well, I think the first that comes to mind is ESG. ESG is not a fad. It is here to stay. And the implications of that really will impact capital allocation. If you think about the commitments companies like UPS have made to be carbon neutral, we're going to need to invest to make that happen. And there's only so much cash to go around. So there'll be an overweighting, I believe, of capital allocation into the ESG space, which means something's going to have to give. And maybe that's share repurchases or dividends. But I believe that if you take care of the needs of all the stakeholders, the shareholder will be taken care of. We all have to understand this because it's important for the world, I believe, to lean into this. And it's not going away. It's not going away. The second thing is technology is eating the world. We all know this. And most of us have been working on improving our digital literacy. And we've got artificial intelligence programs and machine learning programs and automation. But I think that digital literacy isn't going to cut it. We're going to have digital fluency. It's the way we operate, the way we think. It impacts the way we train our people. It impacts the kinds of people we bring into our organization. The only way we're going to survive is to become digitally fluent.
That's a perfect place to stop, because I think that's the message we'd love everyone to walk away from here as we talk about not just the skill sets that we need for the future, but how businesses operate. Carol Tomei, thank you for what you do, for the leadership and the service that you provide here in Georgia and around the world. We appreciate Suzanne giving us the opportunity today to have this conversation, and we look forward to hearing more from UPS and being a partner as we move forward. So thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.
Now more than ever, we know it is critical to have the right environment for businesses to grow and thrive. The right regulatory, tax, and other policies at the national level can enable the big thinkers in America to innovate and find durable solutions that are critical for our communities and economy. The American business community needs elected leaders with the courage to reach across the aisle, find common ground, and forge real solutions in pursuit of a better tomorrow. Fortunately, there are leaders working hard to advance policy that support America's free enterprise system and move our economy forward. Here to lead a discussion about collaboration in government is Neil Bradley, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Executive Vice President, Chief Policy Officer, and Head of Strategic Advocacy.
Thank you, Glenn. Here at the Chamber, we believe in the competition of ideas, in markets and in government. Our free enterprise system depends on a functioning government where public policy is vigorously debated through structures that help us resolve our differences. This requires elected officials who not only hold fast to their principles, but are also capable of finding common ground. I'm joined today by two senators who've demonstrated that even in today's polarized environment, they are up to the task. Please welcome Senator Susan Collins, Republican from Maine, and Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire. Thank you both for joining us today. How you doing?
Good. Good. Thank you, Neil.
Well, it's an honor to be with both of you again. I want to start where I left in the introduction. You're both senators. You're both from the Northeast. But sometimes you have pretty divergent views on public policy and the direction that Congress ought to take when it comes to legislating. Yet somehow you two have a track record of finding common ground, whether that was broadband in the most recent infrastructure package or your work on the Appropriations Committee. How does that work? What does that process look like? Senator Collins, how do you find common ground with colleagues that maybe you don't agree with?
Well, first of all, Neil, let me thank you for inviting us to participate in this closely divided world that we're living in today. I think Americans at times feel that there is no bipartisanship in Washington. And there isn't as much as I would like, but there are many successful bipartisan efforts. And Jeanne Shaheen and I are a great example of that. We do belong to different parties, but what we do is identify common ground. Neither of us thinks that coming together and discussing issues and trying to find compromise is the wrong approach. I think it's the right approach. And Senator Shaheen has been a wonderful partner. We've worked so well together. Sometimes she takes the lead, sometimes I take the lead. That's not the issue. The issue is that we're both pragmatic and we want to produce results. And the best example of that is the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which represents the greatest investment in our infrastructure in this country since the construction of the interstate system. Senator Shaheen and I worked on the broadband provisions, which are so important to our economy, to business location, to workers being able to work from home, and to education, and also to telemedicine. But we've worked together on many other issues as well, ranging from diabetes to preventing harmful cuts in Medicare that would have been particularly devastating to our rural hospitals. So there's a host of issues that a lot of times the press doesn't focus on, perhaps because it's good news, where we do come together. And it's been a great pleasure to work with Senator Shaheen on so many issues.
Well, Senator Shaheen, I want to bring you into the conversation, want your perspective, but I'd also love to hear about your constituents' reaction. You know, we often hear that voters are looking for people who are going to Washington to fight, but I also suspect they want people who are going to go to Washington and get things done. What's been the reaction to some of your bipartisan achievements from your constituents?
Well, I would echo Senator Collins' comments about our ability to work together, and also about the presentation this morning as a way to encourage people to think about working together. I think probably the most often heard remark that I get from my New Hampshire constituents is, why can't you all just work together to get things done to benefit the country? So I think that's what people are looking for. They may be on one side or the other of the political spectrum, but mostly they want to see the country advance. They want to see their problems solved. And they want us to work together to do that. They're less concerned about what party is in the right. They're more concerned about which party is going to make a difference in my life. And the only way we get there is by working together. Now, as a Democratic governor in New Hampshire, I had Republican legislatures my whole time. And one of the lessons I learned that I've put to use, good use here in Washington, is that the best legislation happens when there's a wide body of input into that legislation, and when it's bipartisan, because then people not only work together to get it done, but they work out a lot of the concerns ahead of time before it starts to get implemented. So my experience is that people want us to work together. That's what I've tried to do. And it's great to have partners like Senator Collins, who shares many of my approaches to solving legislation.
So I want to dig in for a moment into the nuts and bolts of how this happens. You know, the old stories were of, smoke-filled rooms where senators would get together and resolve differences. And then, in the textbook, you read about committee markups and what's happening there. I suspect the truth is somewhere in the middle when you all are coming together to resolve issues. Talk to us a little bit about how that happens. And maybe we can use the example that's in the news today. You're both part of a bipartisan working group looking at the Electoral Count Act. This is the law from the 19th century about how Congress counts the electoral ballots after a presidential election. How does that work? How do those discussions take place? How do you build the trust to bring in a group of senators to see if you can come to an agreement? Senator Collins, you want to take us through the process here?
Well, let me talk more broadly about how we do go about this. First of all, we've been able to put together a group of about 22 senators who are interested in trying to find issues where we can come together and make a real difference. It's unfortunate that more work isn't done through the committee process. I actually prefer that approach, and that is the way the Senate used to operate. But increasingly, what we found is that if a group of us can come together, we can make a real difference. I do not believe that we would have had an infrastructure bill pass, and one that's going to make such a difference, not only on roads and bridges and broadband, but water systems in this country, rail, you name it. I don't think that would have passed, but for the fact that 10 of the senators who belong to our broader 22 senator group came together and worked on the issues with the administration. And believe me, it was hard work. Often we meet in one another's hideaways or offices in the Capitol, and there's no smoke. occasionally there's a little wine, but there's no smoke. But we took turns because these meetings went late, bringing in food for us to eat, for our staff to eat. We frequently had members of the administration join us in the discussion after we had determined a framework and where we wanted to go on the infrastructure bill. But I remember one night very well where Jean Shaheen and I stayed in my office working through the final details of the $65 billion investment in broadband. And we literally worked past midnight. And I remember we finished up going through the issues at about 11:15 or so. And Senator Shaheen wisely said, let's go through it one more time. And she was so right, because it turned out that there were misunderstandings on one or two issues, and that we'd skipped over one inadvertently. So, but we got agreement that night. It takes persistence, it takes patience, it takes endless meetings and hard work. I had my staff actually add up the number of meetings on the infrastructure bill, and it was in excess of 50 meetings when you count Zoom calls, in-person meetings, meetings just with my Republican colleagues, meetings with everyone, meetings just with Senator Shaheen. So it is a lot of work, and sometimes it's in public through the committee process, because there were bills that we incorporated into the infrastructure package that had gone through the committee process, bipartisan bills, and sometimes it's working one-on-one or in smaller groups. So it varies, but what it does require is a lot of commitment and hard work.
So it
Yeah,
sounds
and
like
I would add on the commitment side, I thought about that night in your office too, Susan, and it was really pizza and Diet Coke, I think, that got us through until after midnight, not smoke-filled rooms. But it is that commitment to actually get something done. There were a number of times, I think, in the infrastructure negotiations when things might have fallen apart. But when they did, one person or another, and it was people on both sides of the political spectrum, said, we can't fail. We have got to get this done. And I think it's that commitment that allows us ultimately to reach agreement and find solutions.
You both mentioned the Appropriations Committee, and I noted earlier that you both serve on that committee. This is the committee that approves the annual funding for our entire federal government. It used to be that the Appropriations Committee, year in and year out, was the committee that always worked, because you had to work, right? If you don't come together, if you don't find agreement, the government isn't funded. And we've seen how harmful in the past, and both sides of the aisle, government shutdowns can be for American citizens, for the business community, for our broader nation. How do you see the outlook in the Appropriations Committee? Are there things that need to be done to reinforce the work that you're doing? Are there things that those of us outside of government can do to help support you to find more common areas of agreement? Senator Shaheen?
Well, the appropriations process really needs to work in order to provide some certainty for the business community, for our federal agencies, for states on what's going to happen with federal funding. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked very well in the last couple of decades. As you point out, we've had too many continuing resolutions that provide too much uncertainty as companies and agencies are trying to plan, and that needs to change. I think there has been a lot of agreement among subcommittees on the Appropriations Committee. I know Jerry Moran, who is the Republican senator from Kansas, he and I have switched off as chair and ranking member, and I think this is true of Senator Collins, who has been chair and ranking member on the Transportation and Housing Subcommittee. We have had a lot of agreement, and it hasn't much mattered whether I was chairing or he was chairing. We were able to come to agreement, and move forward. And I think for the majority of subcommittees, that's the case. There are a few where there are partisan ideological issues that hang things up, that get bumped up to leadership, and that's a real problem. And we need to try and continue to find agreement, to work together to get things done. Again, I know that's what Senator Collins is always trying to do, and I think we have some positive momentum, hopefully, going into this current fiscal year and the upcoming one, because we need, again, to provide certainty. And that's what I think the Chamber and other businesses can do, is continue to advocate for getting appropriations done, for getting a budget done, so that they know how to plan, so that you all know how to plan, so that it's an improvement for our economy, for all of the people who are working for your businesses to know what's happening at the federal level. So I hope we will continue to stay committed to that. And I know Senator Collins won't say this, but she hopefully is going to be moving up on the Appropriations Committee in a way that will be very positive as we think about the work we have to do.
You know, Senator Collins, today we've been talking about the state of American business, both competition and collaboration. In the appropriations contest, it's a competition in some respects between a limited pot of dollars, and different senators and the House and the president all have different priorities. So it's not about removing competition from the system, the competition of ideas, is it? It's about framing that competition in a way that produces an outcome. Is that the way that you think about it? And when you're leading potentially your side of the aisle in the Appropriations Committee, is that the way you're going to approach it?
Yes, and I wanted to just add a couple of comments to what Senator Shaheen said. I agreed with everything that she pointed out. When government shuts down because the appropriations process has come to a standstill, it represents a failure to govern. When we pass continuing resolutions which fund government at last year's level, we increase costs to the business community because of the uncertainty, and thus we increase costs to taxpayers because of the uncertainty. We prevent new starts, whether it's building a new destroyer or repairing a road, from going forward. And that increased costs, particularly nowadays. So it is really important that we get back to the system of passing most of the appropriations bills, if not all of them, prior to the start of the next fiscal year. If we did that, it would make a big difference. It's frustrating to me that there are probably 5 of the appropriations bills that could zip through the Senate with limited debate, a few amendments on each, and be sent to the president. But they're being held up because of disputes on some of the more controversial appropriations bills. As Senator Shaheen mentioned, if all goes well, I will either become the chairman or the vice chairman of the appropriations bill in the next Congress. And my goal is going to be to try to move at least some of the bills on time so that they are actually signed into law prior to the start of the fiscal year. But I'll tell you, there's another key player in this, and that is the administration. The administration this year did not submit its budget till very late. That's understandable in the first year of an administration, but that cannot be the way the administration operates going forward. We've got to have the administration's budget, even though it's very rare that we follow the administration's budget, regardless of who is in the White House. We need to have that document in order to begin in the committee process of hearings, of getting testimony from department and agency heads, and beginning writing the appropriations bills. Our appropriations bill at the Transportation and Housing Committee, it has been ready to go for months. And it's frustrating to me that it has not been brought to the Senate floor. We should at least get through those bills on which there's agreement, like Senator Shaheen's bill with Senator Moran and my bill with Senator Schatz. It used to be with Jack Reed and I, who had a great relationship and always got our bill done in a bipartisan way. So the chamber can help by pointing out the additional expense that the uncertainty of not knowing whether a program's going to be or a project's going to be funded creates for the business community, and how that is passed on in the bids that are submitted to federal departments, and ultimately it's the taxpayer that bears the bill.
Well, Senator Collins, Senator Shaheen, you can count on the U.S. Chamber being there to help you achieve your goal of Congress addressing some of these long-standing and even annual issues. I think we identified maybe 3 key ingredients, maybe 3 or 4 key ingredients. Ample supplies of diet soda, ample supplies of pizza, a little bit of wine, and a whole lot of conversation. And whether that's business or politics, those may be good recipes for progress. So, Senator Collins, Senator Shaheen, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience from across the country and the world who've joined us. We hope all of these discussions have demonstrated the various ways competition drives innovation, builds global leadership, and fosters the bold ideas that will move our economy and society forward. We won't always agree, but if we can agree on the common goal of building an economy that's diverse, resilient, and innovative, then there's little doubt that the state of American business will be strong. Join us again each Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time for a new episode of The Competition, a limited virtual series of policy discussions around the themes you heard today. We look forward to hosting you for these conversations. Thank you for taking part in this year's State of American Business event. We'll see you next week.